Good afternoon, my imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, Robert Meyer Burnett, here for the 10th live Robservations chat. It is noon. The Seahawks are going to play the Arizona Cardinals at 1:25 today, and they're going to win gloriously, but it's really not a feat based on the Arizona Cardinals record this year. Today, I would like to say that this live broadcast is brought to you by Cali Cream and Beer from the Mother Earth Brewing Company. Now, they really haven't endorsed this at all, nor do they even know who I am, probably, although I tweeted to them once. I love this beer. It's a vanilla beer, basically. It's not a vanilla beer, but it's a beer that's made with vanilla, and I quite enjoy it. So you can get it now at Trader Joe's all the time. It's hard to find. It used to be hard to find in Sixers, but now you can find it in Sixers. So I'm going to drink this Sunday beer in honor of all the gallant warriors on the gridiron today. Perhaps if anyone at the Mother Earth Brewing Company or anyone responsible for making Cali Cream and Beer sees this, they can know that I truly love their product, which leads into something I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about the most important lesson I ever learned working in Hollywood. I'm going to take you into the Wayback Machine to the year 1989. I had just finished my senior year in college at USC. And I had managed to finagle myself a job on the Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, not the one with Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger. That came later. This was New Line Cinema's attempt to create a new franchise that would equal the success of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Frankly, in hindsight, that was probably ill because Leatherface and his family of cannibals were really just not wisecracking, child molesting serial killers that brought the fun and mirth the way Freddy Krueger did. Anyway, this was my first motion picture. I had just gotten out of film school. I couldn't believe my good fortune, and I was working on my first movie as the art department assistant. And I've talked about this before. What is an art department assistant? Well, basically, the production designer, the great Mick Strawn and his sister CJ, were basically sharing. One would work on one New Line Cinema movie, and the other would work on the other New Line Cinema movie. They sort of traded off chores. It was a glorious time because New Line was making not only the Nightmare on Elm Street films, they were making movies like The Hidden. They were doing some great theatrically released B movies. So it was a heady time, my friends. It was a great time to be working in Hollywood. Now, I couldn't believe my good fortune, but I knew nothing about being an art department assistant. I'd come out of film school thinking about film theory and how I wanted to become, the next Orson Welles or Spielberg or John Carpenter, Stanley Kubrick, David Cronenberg. That's what I thought. But now I'm the art department assistant, which I figured was the lowest of the low. It turned out not to be. One of my first days on the job, actually, I think it was my first day on the job, I was handed 2 sets of keys, $10,000 in cash, and I handed a list. And they told me, don't come back until you have everything on that list. Good luck. You now have control of the Ford Dually pickup truck and the Ford Econoline van. They're yours. I'm like, wow. And then I was going to follow up with asking questions about where do I get these things on the list? No, I knew this was a test. This was my first day on the job, and it was a test. I had to go pick up paint in Compton. I had to go to the A1 Globe building and pick up whatever was left from the making of Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. It was a test. And the thing on the list that I had to pick up that scared me the most were "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers. Now, we're in Valencia, California, by Magic Mountain, not very, very close to where the Axonar stage it was, frankly. So what do? This is in the pre-internet era. This is where you found out where you were going by having a Thomas guide in your car. I always joked it was Tobin's Spirit Guide from Ghostbusters. It was this thick book of maps, and you had to figure out how to get where you were going. So there was no outside help. So the first thing that I thought about was, where the hell am I going to get "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers in California, in Southern California. And I thought to myself, well, where would you get "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers at all? And I figured a truck stop, a truck stop. So I used the phone book, the Yellow Pages. I let my fingers do the walking, and I found the largest truck stop that I could find that was close to the studio. And I drove out there. And it was one of these gigantic truck stops, with places you could sleep, places where semis could park. They had showers. I'm sure all manner of shenanigans took place in the parking lot after hours, but it was big and it had a gift store. So I went in there and they had spindle racks of hundreds of different kinds of bumper stickers. Ass, gas, or grass. No one rides for free. That chestnut. All kinds of bumper stickers like that. And sure enough, not only was there a "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper sticker, there was like 3 or 4 different "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers. So I bought them all. And that was the beginning of my filmmaking career. You need to be resourceful and have the wherewithal to do things. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. That's not even the lesson that I mentioned I was going to speak about. Here is the thing about Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Motherfucking Ken Foree from Dawn of the Dead, who played Peter, was co-starring in Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Why does this matter? This was 1989. It was basically a decade after one of my favorite, not only my favorite horror film, but one of my favorite films of all time was released. And I'm talking about motherfucking Dawn of the Dead, George Romero's sequel to Night of the Living Dead. A movie, first of all, Dawn of the Dead, a guy named Bud Warner hooked me up with my very first bootleg videotape in 1980. And it was on 2 VHS tapes, and it was Dawn of the Dead. And it was recorded off of a movie screen. I first saw Dawn of the Dead. I won tickets to see it on KYYX radio. And my dad wouldn't let me go because it was on a school night. So when Dawn of the Dead opened, my dad took me to the theater, to the UA 150 and UA 70 or 90, whatever it's called. The UA 150, and then there was this other house that was not the UA 150. It was half that. UA 75, but it wasn't the UA 75. My dad, when Dawn of the Dead first came out, it said under 17, not admitted. My dad lied and went up with me to the box office and paid for me to go into the theater by myself by lying to the box office, the woman at the box office, saying my mom was inside already, as if my mom would already be inside of a theater to see Dawn of the Dead on opening night. She was not. My dad lied. Now, I had received the novelization by George A. Romero and Susanna Sparrow in hardcover form from the Science Fiction Book Club. So I'd already read the book. And I couldn't believe at this point in my life, I had not seen, I admit to you now, Night of the Living Dead. Had not seen it. Hadn't seen it yet. Read about it, saw pictures of it. But, home video I didn't have a VCR until 1980. And this is, I don't know the exact day I saw Dawn, that it was either sometime in 78 or 79. I didn't see Night of the Living Dead until I first got a VCR. And again, I got it on Meta Home Entertainment. So it began my lifelong love affair with Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead is one of these movies that I know every line. Like Star Wars, it was the horror version of Star Wars for me. If I had it, I watched Star Wars 100 times on VHS. I watched Dawn of the Dead, my shitty, horrible, awful bootleg copy of Dawn of the Dead, until Thorn EMI put it out domestically. Anyway, I could recite Dawn of the Dead backwards and forwards. So I was absolutely beside myself to know that the very first movie that I ever was going to work on, by the way, I have a screen credit on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Leatherface, my first screen credit in the end crawl. But the fact that an actor who, let's face it, your favorite movies, the reason you keep watching them over and over is because those people are your friends. You like them. It's kind of like what Penny Lane said in Almost Famous. You can always go visit your friends in the record store because back then people loved musicians. They still do, but I agree with that. The Corleone family, I know them. The McLean family, I know them. Harry Albright, Sally Albright and Harry Burns, friends of mine. So we watch movies. The entire cast of Animal House. I wish I was in a frat with them. I wish I was, back in the day. But we love movies, I think, because the people in them, the characters in them, we relate to them on a very deep level for whatever reason. The four characters, Stephen, Roger, Fran, and Peter in Dawn of the Dead were friends of mine, even though they didn't all survive the zombie apocalypse. They were my friends. So to work on a movie with Ken motherfucking Foree, who played Peter, one of the survivors of Dawn of the Dead, I was beside myself. Now, here's what I believed would happen on the now I should say that growing up in Seattle, I wrote a film column for my high school newspaper. I went to the Seattle Film Festival, and I met lots of actors, lots of celebrities that I wanted to meet. I talked to Paul Verhoeven for an hour when Flesh and Blood played at the closing night film festival. I met Jennifer Jason Leigh and her boyfriend at the time, Bruno Kirby. I met Helena Bonham Carter and Carrie Elwes, and I had a fun time interviewing all by myself the director of Beverly Hills Cop, and of course, Gigli. I've met a lot of celebrities, but I always met them in the context of whatever it was I was supposed to be talking to them about. So I couldn't bro down with any of them and make them understand how much I believed that celebrities. I figured that if a celebrity was in a movie that you liked, that celebrity must get up every morning. I believe that Ken Foree probably got up every morning, looked in the mirror, and thought to himself, damn, I was in motherfucking Dawn of the Dead. And he would sit there in front of the mirror as he was shaving or toweling off from a nice hot shower and just run lines. Just relive every day of production and think about who he was and how great it was he was in this movie. And now he'd become a cult figure amongst horror aficionados. And as a matter of fact, I figured that Ken Foree, or pretty much any actor that was in any movie that I ever liked, would just sit there and think to themselves all day long how great they were for being in that movie. They would consider the philosophical implications of every action their character took in the movie. And then at night, they would throw on the latest iteration, whether it was at the time VHS and Laserdisc, and they would just sit down and watch themselves in the movie that they were in every night. Because pretty much that's what I did. I would watch movies every night. So I'm working on this movie set, and I'm trying to maintain this air of professionalism. I'm every moment, basically as an art department assistant, I had to buy drinks for the construction crew. Sometimes I got to build props. I had to go stand guard of our sets because one of the farmhouse set was in behind Magic Mountain in the hills, and another was up in Palmdale. We built this gas station set in Palmdale, and people would stop thinking it's a real gas station. So I'd have to be like, no, it's not a real gas station. And people would get mad at me, or I'd have to just drive around and make runs. Sometimes somebody asked me to drop off their 8x10 at a casting agency. Now, you don't say no. As the art department production assistant, you just do what they tell you to do. But I knew that at some point, while working on the production of Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, I was going to get my shot. I was going to be able to sit down with Mr. Ken Foree, and he was going to know that me meeting him, a colleague, an equal, on the set of a major motion picture being made by New Line Cinema, Bob Shaye's New Line Cinema, who later went on to make the Lord of the Rings films, even though I had no way of knowing that was going to happen in the future. But let's just face it, at this point in time, New Line was responsible. They released The Evil Dead originally. They released all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films starting in 1984 with the first one. They made The Hidden, Jack Shoulder's The Hidden, and Jack Shoulder also famously directed Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which is really a coming out story. Still great. I mean, and he directed a movie called By Dawn's Early Light, which you should check out. It's pretty interesting. Great Cold War thriller. But there was going to be a moment on this set, on this movie set, where I was going to be able to have a conversation, an equal conversation, colleagues, filmmakers, all, where Ken Foree and I were going to sit down and I was going to make him know, I was going to make him understand that I was one of the Dawn of the Dead faithful, that the way he must recite lines and think about this movie and his character's fate And he wondered what happened to Fran and Peter after they left in the WGON helicopter at the end of Dawn of the Dead. He was going to kill himself, put a bullet in his head, but at the last minute, he decided not to because that was a reshoot. Anyway, I wanted to know what happened. And I would be his friend for life. Like Ken Foree would know that I was such a Dawn of the Dead fan that he'd call me up just for dinner. He'd be like, "Hey, Rob, I was thinking about, I don't know, making some Peking duck tonight. Perhaps you could pick up some fried rice and we'll make a Chinese meal out of it." And we would be the best of friends. And so we're working on the movie, and we shot a lot of nights, which isn't fun. We did splits, we shot nights. And it was very apparent to me watching Ken Foree work that he was an incredibly nice man and a consummate professional and a great actor. It was a thrill. Actually, all of the people, Bill Butler, Kate Hodge, Viggo Mortensen, like Viggo Mortensen. So you might have been married to Exene from X. I didn't know who you were. Not then. I was all about Ken Foree. But working on this film, my first experience on a movie was a joy. It was a joy. I had the best time in the world. Hardest job I ever had. 10 hours. I mean, I worked 12 to 16 hours a day every day. I had to drive a long way to get there. But it was still, to this day, probably the most thrilling and fun time I've ever had working on a movie. But I knew that one day, my moment with Ken Foree was going to come. And I would convince him, again, like I just said, I was a faithful. I was part of the Dawn of the Dead faithful, the cult of the dead, whatever you want to call it. And I just couldn't wait to show Ken Foree what I knew and how he would understand. So one day, it happened. I was at lunch, and we were at the farmhouse set where we shot a lot of the movie, the evil cannibalistic Leatherface's clan, R.A. Mihailoff, Big R.A., by the way, who was a bear of a sweetheart. He played Leatherface. And so at lunch, we were in this bucolic setting in the hills behind Magic Mountain, and you had picnic tables, and when you had lunch, everybody kind of sat everywhere else. On a movie like this, the actors, they intermingle with the crew. I mean, the crew actually hates themselves. Usually keep a distance from the talent in a respectful manner. Ken Foree sat down right next to me. Right next to me. And there I am eating lunch. No pressure. We're not gonna resume shooting for a while. So I had to compose myself because deep down inside I was shaking, man. This was it. Ken Foree, star of Dawn of the Dead, right next to me. I could touch him. He was that close. That close. So I had to compose myself. And I realized I used to work retail. I was Laser Bob at Silver Platters in Seattle. I'd worked in video stores from 1980 to 88. I know how to deal with the public. I lived in Bellevue, Washington, for God's sakes. There was a lot of people that expected, treatment, to be treated well. So I finally mustered up the courage. I did not have California cream and beer from the Mother Earth Brewing Company. So that's what I did. I composed myself. Turned, and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Foree." And he turned, and he's a big guy, 6'5", big strapping man. He's got this big, beautiful smile with these big white teeth. And he's like, "Well, yeah, how's it going? Who are you?" I'm like, "Sir, I am Robert Burnett. I use my middle name professionally only in the credits. People call me on the internet Robert Meyer Burnett. It's fine. I'm just Rob or Bob, Bobby, whatever you want." I said, "Mr. Foree." I didn't call him Ken. You don't call people by their first names when you just meet them. I said, "Mr. Foree, I'm the art department production assistant on this film." And he goes, "Wow, you guys have done a great job. Look at this set." And I said, "Yes." And I said to him, "I've been watching you work, and you're a tremendously talented actor. And it's just been a real joy to see a consummate professional at work. And I have to say to you, sir, I am a great fan of the work that you've done with the famous horror film and cult director, George A. Romero, specifically the work you guys did together in Night Riders." And then I gave a little bit of a pause. and Dawn of the Dead. And Ken Foree nodded. He smiled. He said, "Thank you very much. Thank you very much." And then he went back and he kept eating his lunch. That was it. See, right at the punchline, someone comes through. But he went back to eat his lunch. And I was like, that's it? And then I said, Dawn of the Dead, man, was that fun to make? Because, and did you have a good time? I figured, we're going to run lines, right? Like, this is the beginning of our peakinship, isn't it? Isn't it? Like, aren't you going to regale me with tales from the set? Like, aren't you going to tell me what they served at the catering table every morning? Like, I wanted to hear it all, man. I wanted that's what I thought would happen. That's what I thought. I thought I was opening. I thought he would realize that I was somebody that knew how cool it was he was in Dawn of the Dead. And then, of course, he would run lines with me because he ran lines with himself every morning after he got out of the shower, right? Isn't that what happened? Ken Foree turns. He goes, yeah, I'm glad people love Dawn of the Dead. I had a great experience making the film. And the thing I remember most about the movie was just how cold it was the whole time. And then he turned back and he kept eating his lunch. And I realized that was it. That was all I was going to get. My dreams of Ken Foree and I becoming friends based on I conflated Ken Foree as a human being with a character he had portrayed a decade previously in a movie. And that's when I realized it was actually a shocking revelation because it had never occurred to me before. Because all of us that love movies, we have our favorite characters. And we want to believe that when we meet those actors in real life, that they are those characters. And Ken Foree, consummate professional, great actor, terrifically nice man. But he's not Peter, his character from Dawn of the Dead. That was a character he was hired to play. It was a character that he was directed to play. It was a character he brought his own interpretation to and expertly played him. And then when the film was done shooting, he went off to try and go get another job. Then the editors took over. Romero took over. Pascal Buba and his team took over with Mr. Romero, and they started editing the massive amounts of film. Actors are gone, man. Actors work on movies the least amount of time, but they're the people that we most identify with because we believe in the great films that those actors are no longer, those actors are the characters they're playing. And so there I was at 22 years old with this amazing revelation in my mind. And I have to admit, I was disappointed. Like, learning this lesson, as all important lessons to learn are, was sort of internally shattering to me. Now, was this Ken Foree's fault? Of course not. It wasn't Ken Foree's fault. He didn't know. Like, he doesn't know I'm sitting at home like, yeah, I'm going to watch Dawn of the Dead for the 387th time. And when he walks out, when Ken Foree walks out on the second floor of that shopping mall and says, Macumba, voodoo. Granddad was a priest in Trinidad, and he used to tell us, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. I mean, he didn't know that was ringing in my head when I stepped on set every single day. I mean, how about when Ken Foree says in Dawn of the Dead, do you want to abort it? It's not too late, and I know how. I mean, come on, man. This was, but I realized that these are my own expectations. I was imposing my own expectations, which were not fair, and they were not. Ken Foree didn't even know. Like, and if I had gone off, if I'd been like, "Oh, Mr. Foree, can we run lines from Dawn of the Dead?" He would have gotten up from that picnic table, walked away, and kept his distance. As a matter of fact, he might have mentioned to the first AD that the art department production assistant is creeping him out a little bit, and I might have been replaced. So the greatest lesson I learned in Hollywood was that actors are just like everybody else on the set. They are there. They are professionals. They are there to do a job, and they should be treated as such. And this was a lesson. I was a PA on many different movies after that, some credited, some uncredited. But then I realized we all are ensorcelled by celebrity. But when you're actually in a position where you're working with people, celebrities want to be considered the professionals and as the part of the crew that they are. But however, they are front and center. So the success or failure of a movie falls upon them, and the pressure on them is tremendous. So that, my friends, is my Ken Foree story. By the way, there is an addendum to this story. I would say about, I don't know, 15 years later, I ran into Mr. Foree again at a Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Maybe it was a DVD release reunion. And I was there with writer David J. Scow. And it's really interesting. David wrote Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1989. And I hired him. We became lifelong friends. And I hired him. I had him rewrite the script, and he wrote the script for The Hills Run Red, which came out 20 years later in 2009. So one of the great things about working on movies is you do forge lifelong relationships with people that you collaborate with. But I got to meet Ken Foree again at this Leatherface reunion, and I told him this story. And he was like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." He laughed and he clapped me on the back, and he's like, "Well, I couldn't have known." I go, "I know, man." But then I told him that if I didn't have this experience, I wouldn't have learned this lesson. And when I did make the movie Free Enterprise with my childhood idol, William Shatner, imagine what that was like. Meeting William Shatner outside of a convention experience and walking into his office, hanging out with him and broing down with Bill as I was going to make Free Enterprise. Had I not had that experience, had I not learned the lesson, William Shatner would have said, "Get out of my office, and I never ever want to work with you again, no matter how much you pay me." And he was probably right. So the lesson that I learned on the very first movie I ever worked on, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, served me well throughout my entire Hollywood career. And because of my attitude, I was able to meet many celebrities, and they never knew how much I would sit at home and recite the lines that they had said in the movies that they were in that I loved. So there you go. That's my important Hollywood lesson for today. I'm now going to go up and I'm going to answer your questions on this live stream. So thanks for listening to that story. So here we go. Lou says the Axonar script was excellent. I'm glad you feel that way. It's a goddamn shame it'll never be made. Movie for newbie. I've never been a big beer fan, but one made with vanilla sounds interesting. It is. Ken says, "Hi, Mr. Burnett. How you doing, Kens? Where are you? Where you at?" Rex Overdrive says, "Good afternoon." Ian Strang asks me, "Hey, Robert, did you watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse yet?" No. Maybe today. Profeta de San Ramon asks, "What's my opinion of the embarrassing toxic fandom of Star Wars?" That it's embarrassing and toxic. Look, I have been a detractor of many different movies, but I'm happy those movies exist to be detracted from. I think The Last Jedi was a really interesting story. I like the chase context. The whole movie's basically one long chase, essentially, with a ticking clock. There are story points that I would have done differently. I loved what happened to Luke because it was unexpected. Where they took him, he's now a grizzled and bittered man that feels his faith has left him. And then at the end of the film, when he comes back and he's the most badass Jedi ever, he pulls the most Jedi thing we've ever seen, which is if the Jedi for defense and never for attack, he participates in a battle with Kylo Ren that he's not even at. What is more Jedi than that? Come on. Lou says, was a beer drinker, now much more Scotch drinker now too. I am too, but you know what? I would be drinking a tall frosty glass of any Scotch, but it is only noon and it's Sunday on a holiday weekend. It's a football day. And yeah. So Vesna, all the way from the Balkans, says, which job you like to work on the most? Editing in the art department or script directing, producing, or you have to pick one, which would it be? Well, obviously, I think directing is the most fun because directing, you're interacting with everybody on a set. It's great. And that's the thing that I like most is everyone else that brings all of their creative disciplines. I like being able to just suggest things and watch really talented people go execute them. and how everybody works together for the sum, the greater good. The finished film should be greater than the sum of its parts. And I like directing, but I adore editing. Editing is very lonely sometimes, but I really, really, really love working with the director on a film that they're making, because I feed off the director's energy. I'm working with two directors now, Lucas Kendall and Gabe Bologna, on the feature I'm producing and editing, Tango Shalom, which has been a lot of fun because I get to participate in their creative visions, and both of them have afforded me the creative opportunities to input what I think, and it's tremendous. It's great. Bumper stickers, do they still exist? Wicked asks. Never seen them in Europe. I don't know. They're still around. It's just that I see bumper stickers as kind of being like tattoos. You might get a badass tattoo when you're young and then regret it later. I think there's a lot of people, the old bumper sticker that says, if the van is a knocking, or if the van is a rockin', don't come a knocking. I would be embarrassed if I ever put that bumper sticker on my car. Actually, I might have been embarrassed if I ever owned a van. Maybe not. I don't know. I'd own a van now if it was totally tricked out with some like plush back carpeting, and it'd be great. Movie Finobi says now adults bring their 5-year-olds into R-rated movies because they can't get a babysitter. Yeah, I think that's really wrong, frankly. Why would you do that? Claude Dozier says, hi, Rob. Hello from Italy. Hello, Claude. How are you? I think you've been here before. Do you think that Hollywood has more lobby today? The quality of film is more horizontal. Maybe sorry for my English. I'm not sure what you're asking. Let me look at it again. Hi, Rob. Hello from Italy. Do you think that Hollywood has more lobby today, more quality, and the quality of film is more horizontal? I don't know. I don't quite know what you mean by that. Help me out, everyone. Could you punch it up in Italy? Write it in Italian, and somebody should translate it for me. Writer BL Ali says, I miss recording at shopping stores. I miss. Yes. I was 18 years old, 1989. I knew Dawn of the Dead scene by scene too. Triple Interclass says, I know, right? I still do. I still quote that movie all the time in my head. Movie Shinobi says, are there behind the scenes crews sort of in their own space groups as opposed to the actors? You know what? Yes. Here's the thing about being shooting behind the scenes. I've been embedded. I was overseas on Superman Returns for a year. I was also in New Zealand on and off on A Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe while it was filming. We were there on Lord of the Rings after the fact, but it really depends. I've found that on movies, when you're part of the behind the scenes crew, it depends how the director views you. Bryan Singer on Superman Returns wanted me around all the time. I was next to him all the time while the movie was being shot, which meant the actors really came to know and trust me. And on the weekends, film crews like to party. And it sort of felt to me sometimes on Superman Returns to organize what everyone was doing on the weekends. Because, I'm there to support them and to watch them work and to film them. And it's an interesting thing. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone ever, now you just have EPK, electronic press kit crews, going on and shooting behind the scenes for a couple of days. But when you're embedded with the crew, at first a crew's all suspect of you. They don't want you around. You've got a camera and they're worried that they're going to do something wrong and you're going to catch it on film. But once they come to trust you and they realize you are there to share their stories and share their abilities, then it worked really, really well. But that was a skill you had to learn. You had to sort of learn that. And behind the scenes crews understand that they're not part of the movie. They're not making the movie. They are, by definition, outside of the crew making the film. Let's see. Great chat already. Well, thank you. Movie Finobi says, I like your confidence. Oh, thank you for that. You have to have confidence to work on a movie, because if you don't, I'm talking about working on a movie set. Movie sets are a place where every second literally has a calculatable dollar value behind it. You know how you have a 12-hour day you have to shoot. You know how much money you have for that day. Say it's a $50,000 day. You can back into that number. How many seconds are in 12 hours? And if you have $50,000 to shoot that day, you can divide that into the 50,000 and find out how much every second costs. Now, think about if you had to lead your life thinking about how much every tick of the clock cost you. And if you had to achieve a goal by the end of every day and you knew that you were burning your resources every tick of that second hand, you would live your life differently. That's why movies are so hard to produce. Vesna says, first lesson, acting is just a job, just like being in the art department. It's true. It is. I mean, it's more than a job in this. I mean, no, it is a job, but your job is, there's a lot of responsibility on an actor, especially think about a big tentpole movie where an actor's front and center and they're spending $200 million. You don't think an actor doesn't go home every night and thinks about that? One of the most inspiring things in my life ever was watching how much hard work Brandon Routh put in to being Superman. He had to work out every day. He worked with an acting coach every day. He had never had the responsibility on his shoulders. Watching him was an incredible inspiration. And he let me follow him around with a camera. Let's see. Movie Finobi says, a good lesson. Even when people are approachable or accessible, it doesn't mean that connection in your head will be there. Absolutely not. It never is. They don't know you. They don't know you. And they certainly don't know that Ken Foree did not know that I watched Dawn of the Dead 150 times. He just didn't know that, nor did he know that I had an expectation about him. We always approach, whenever we see a celebrity, we have expectations about them. Remember that. They don't know who the fuck we are, but we have put expectations on them that are impossible to meet, and it's not fair. Lou asks, do I have an episode about my free enterprise experience? I have not done that yet. For those of you who don't know, I wrote and directed a film. I co-wrote the film with Mark Altman, and I directed and edited the film. It came out June 4th, the same day as Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan came out. June 4th, 1999. So 2019 is its 20th anniversary. The last time it was released on DVD was in 2006. Anchor Bay put it out as a double disc set. It's out of print. I'm hoping to be able to get it out on HD this year, but I don't know. Wake me when you get there, Huh says, does Shatner speak in reality the way he delivers his James T. Kirk lines? No, he doesn't. Shatner is a very affable man's man. And when you get around him, he lights up a room. Shatner's he's a lot of great fun to hang out with. David Crabtree says, Orville season 2 premiere tonight. Yes, I'm really looking forward to that now that I've caught up with the first season. Wake me when you get there, Huh says, estimated release date of Tango Shalom. Well, we've submitted it to a few film festivals. We're waiting to hear back from Tribeca. I don't know if that'll happen. The Seattle International Film Festival. So hopefully it'll be done by April or May. TX Alex asks, so should we expect you back on the Schmodown next year after seeing your little cameo? What are you talking about? What little cameo? Schmodown? Those guys left me in a room, man. They left me in a room to stew in my juices. I was there for 6 months. I didn't have Netflix. I had barely any food. I had mice for company, and even then, they'd only show up a few times. What are you talking about? Schmodown. Next, you're going to tell me I should talk to Hector Navarro, too. Do you feel Dawn of the Dead has aged well, but I feel the photography and lighting are a bit hokey? I don't know what that means. Inner Class asks, I mean, I do know what it means. Look, film styles change throughout history. The makeup on the zombies, especially if you have high-def versions of Dawn of the Dead, it's just different. I mean, and I go with that flow. Like I've been somebody who's watched all of film history, so I'm sort of able in my mind to get around those things. It doesn't bother me because I still see it in my mind the way I first hit it to me. Benjamin Workman says, happy New Year's, Rob. Writer BL Ali asks, hey, Rob, did you ever get a chance to read the book I sent you? Was that the Solar? I don't know which book that is, but I've read 2 books people have sent me. One of them might have been yours. I don't know. Because I read like 5 books a day or 5 books a week, but I probably did. I probably just didn't get back to you, and I apologize for that. Olenti says, I missed that. What's with the new glasses? These are just readers, so I can read. As I get older, my can't see as well. We have lots of different colored glasses just around the house. I keep 2 on my edit desk. I've got glasses in the bathroom on my magazine stack pile and next to they're all different colors. They're cheap. David Crabtree says that, first Angry Tom 316 says, that was a great story, Robert. What's your favorite line or scene in Dawn of the Dead? I think my favorite line, it's a little line. It's when Roger and Peter first meet in sort of the bathroom or the basement of the tenement in the building, and Roger says to Peter, "Why do these people keep them here?" And Peter says, "Because they still believe there's respect in dying." I always love that. I thought that was a great line. David Crabtree says, Brandon Routh has developed into such a fine actor since Superman Returns. I really enjoy him on Legends of Tomorrow and would love to. You know, if I made another Superman movie, if somebody put it up to me, I would hire Brandon Routh back to play Superman because he's grown up a little bit. He's much more seasoned as an actor. I think he'd be great. I'm a big proponent of that. If Henry Cavill doesn't come back for Superman, they should bring back Brandon Routh to play Superman because everybody would love that idea. Ryan the Mang says, a movie that has a special place in my heart is the original The Crazies. The idea of something like that happening disturbed me greatly. The remake was okay. I love the remake of The Crazies. The first Crazies, George Romero's film The Crazies, which he made before Martin and he made before Dawn of the Dead, is I think it was also called Codename Trixie, was about a biological spill that causes everyone to go nuts. It's really a great movie, and it's beautifully edited as well. Gutspill says, your graphics guy again. My comment got bumped. Unacceptable. I'm making a smear campaign poster against the channel. On second thought, I'm just going to enjoy those beers. Well, Gutspill, is that you really? For real? Movie Finobi says, have you seen Future Man? Very fun show. Hopefully the Schmodown crew didn't make you eat rats in that room. No, they didn't make me eat rats because somebody would bring me bread and water, which was good. Will they ever finish Narnia? I have heard they are going to. They're going to reboot Narnia. I don't know anything about it. Salam Sadki says, hey, Rob, concerning your story, I felt like my chance is diminishing to get into the script writing field, especially I'm not from the U.S. Do you think that Hollywood would hire non-American scriptwriters? Well, here's the thing. There's people making movies all over the world, but I'll tell you, here's another story. I read this in Dear Abby, and I'm paraphrasing this story, but it was something that I remembered. I remember a woman writing in that said she was like 40 or 43 years old, and she really wanted to be a doctor, but she felt that she was too old, and she should give up on her dreams and that medical school and her internship and all that. She would be 50 years old when she finally became a doctor. And Dear Abby said this. It stuck with me my whole life. Dear Abby said, you're going to be 50 anyway. Words to live by. Never give up on those dreams. Keep writing. What people want, what Hollywood wants, are great pieces of material. And there's films being made all over the world now. I mean, one of the craziest things I saw this year, I mentioned this earlier on a post, is a Turkish horror film I discovered because of John Schnepp on Netflix called Baskin. I was like, Turkey makes horror movies? I thought because it's a predominantly Islamic country that wouldn't fly, but it's about a bunch of racist cops that go on what they think is a drug bust, and they actually find the doorway to hell, and hijinks ensue. I really liked it. Wake me when we get there, huh? Rob is giving the giant middle finger to the Schmodown. No, absolutely not. I think what Christian Harloff and Mark Ellis have done with the Schmodown is incredible. The way they've grown it. I met a lot of great people who work on the Schmodown. Everybody there is delightful. They really are, except Hector Navarro. No, I'm just kidding. He's delightful too. But, again, we're playing a part. We're having fun. That said, fuck those guys. Ryder B.L. Alley says, it's called Relative Age. Yes, I did read that book. We should have a conversation about that book. As a matter of fact, I have it in this desk that I'm sitting at right now. And yes, the cover wasn't the greatest. Benjamin Workman says, Rob, not trying to start anything, but I'm curious about what happened with Collider Heroes. I'm not big into social media. Well, here's the thing. Here's how I felt about Heroes. I was brought on Heroes by John Schnepp, and I was his guest. And we developed a working relationship. I was on, for those who don't know, I was on a weekly and sometimes daily show on the Collider Network from April of 2015 through July of 2018 of this year. And the impresario, the real host of that show, is the great legendary John Schnepp. And John Schnepp passed away in July. And after he was gone, there was some things that happened, I think misunderstandings that happened, and I was sort of treated unfairly. But let's say I understand why it happened. But after that, I felt, if Coy Jandra and Amy Dallin, who took over the show, they really need to make the show their show. the same way that John Schnepp made it his show. And, I don't think I would have been the person that they would have brought on to co-host the show. So I said, you've got to make the show yours. And I'm totally at peace with that. I think they've soldiered on and done a great job. And I think everybody should follow the show. And I, of course, am now on the Weekly Hero. John Campea called up and asked me to do the Weekly Hero. And I started on Heroes with John Schnepp and John Campea. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And then I've been doing his daily show as well. So, I love the Collider channel. I love everybody there. They have my full support. I think what they do is great. And there's a lot of great content still being produced. Let's see. Did you know about Superdog? It's part of the series. You mean Crypto Superman? I'm not sure. Have you seen the shorts by Neil Blomkamp's studio Oats on YouTube? They are great. If you tune in, they're great. I really liked. I haven't watched any lately. I just saw one pop up on my feed that I need to watch. That looks great. F Star number 3 asks, hi Rob, do you remember a Go Nagai puppet show called Starfleet? X-Bomber in Japan. Excellent show from the early 80s. I have never seen it. I've never seen it. And he says my glasses are like the Bugaloos or the Buggles. The Buggles video killed the radio star and the Bugaloos. They're in the air and everywhere. I've not seen. I love Go Nagai. I love Getter Robo and Getter Robo G and yeah, I'm a big fan of his super robot stuff. Yes. What are some of your most anticipated films? Howell's Hollywood Review says, what are your most anticipated films of 2019? Well, Avengers Endgame, number 1. Probably Episode 9, just because it's Star Wars and I can't get away. I can't, even though J.J. Abrams is directing, I can't get away from it's Star Wars, man. I really want to see Star Wars. But yeah, I really want to see Spider-Man Far From Home. The usual. Writer B.L. Alley says, that's a great story. I didn't publish my first novel until I was 50. See? B.L.'s got a great point. You never give up on your dreams. Look, if Clint Eastwood's directing movies and starring in movies like The Mule when he's pushing 90, what excuse do any of us have? We now live in a world where you don't have to retire mandatorily at 65. Anyway, who could? But I think that, look, the great thing about life is I don't ever want to stop making movies and doing things I love. Why wouldn't I? You just keep going. Let's see. What do you know about the movie Captive State? Only the 2 trailers that have dropped. I can't wait to see that. Aliens are now the administrators of Earth, but why? I just hope it doesn't turn out that they're just lizard people that want to steal our water and eat human beings. Because, that's Oscar Castillo says, sup, dude? What's up, Oscar? You gonna watch the Seahawks today? You should. Writer BL Alley says, never give up. And Oscar Castillo says, never surrender. For all of you who've never seen Galaxy Quest, go watch it. Good on you, boys, for saying that. Rob, wake me up when we get there, huh? Rob, if the next Terminator movie fails, is the movie franchise finally dead? I don't think the next Terminator movie is going to fail. Yes, they have a lot to answer for, but you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I found something to like in all of the Terminator movies. Look, Terminator 1 to me is still my favorite because of the B-movie origins, the simplicity, how well it was done on the budget it was done on. Terminator 2 to me is a little sloppy, even though it's great because of how quickly it was made. And all the rest of the films have lots of goofy, stupid shit in them. But I enjoy watching them all, even Genesis. But hopefully, with Tim Miller directing, never count Tim Miller out. I mean, his first feature, Deadpool, come on. He's coming. He's working with Cameron. They're going to straighten this franchise out. I have great faith. Calvin Dexler says, Rob, greetings from Tuscany, man. I've never been to Tuscany. My dream is to take like a biking tour of Tuscany, like in the early fall when it's still warm. Let's say aliens come to Earth and they don't understand cinema. What movie would you make them watch so they understand what good storytelling is all about? That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think the art of understanding cinema is something that needs to be learned. I think people actually need to learn the skill of watching a movie properly. That's a great question. Showing an alien, you know what I would do? I would probably start, honestly, I would start with like nature documentaries, like something like Blue Planet 1 and 2. So they understand cinematic language. They could start to see the juxtaposition of imagery and get used to that if they didn't have that. Because you'd have to start with, you couldn't expect them to understand story because story is all based on human experience. We all understand when someone's walking down the street, we can immediately tell based on the look on their face if they're happy, if they're sad, if they're lonely. What does it mean when you show a character walking down a street, a bustling, say, Manhattan or a New York City street, and they look alone, but they're being swarmed, people are just scurrying around them, not paying attention. We all know that person is either lonely or sad or something. An alien wouldn't have that kind of context. So you would have to start. That's why I love the movie Arrival so much. Arrival is all about how do you begin a dialogue with an alien species that you have no common form of communication with. So probably a documentary. Gary Smith says, Coin Amy are great. Yes, they are. And I love being on the show. Wake Me Up When We Get There says, Johnny Sacco and his flying robot. Love that. Somebody whose name looks like it's in a different, I can't read that, but it's cool. My favorite book. Oh my God, I've got so many favorite books. Recently, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. That's one of my favorite books. Dan Simmons, I said this earlier, Hyperion. Another book that I've loved. It was nominated for the Hugo in 2006. It's difficult to read, but Peter Watts' Blind Sight. Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. I love Snow Crash. I loved a book by Robert Goddard that is not a genre book at all. I mean, it is a genre book, but it's not science fiction, fantasy, and horror, called Impale Battalions. I would love to make that movie, by the way. Anybody wants to make Impale Battalions, I'm your director. Movie Shinobi says, I think you and Schnapp had great chemistry, and it was a unique take which couldn't be replicated. I believe having both shows move forward in their own directions makes sense. I agree. As Duke Leto Atreides tells his son Paul in Dune, by the way, Dune, another one of my favorite books I've ever read, a person needs new experiences. They change things. They stir something deep within us. And I believe that. We do need new experiences. I mean, you know what I also learned when I was in high school? I used to be the guy that was going to stay home and watch TV or see the latest movie that came out or build a model or something. I went to this leadership camp because I was on the student council. I was elected to the student council. Actually, the elected officials brought me onto the student council. It was me and another representative, Kelly Goto. And I went to a leadership camp. And I met people from all over Washington State, and we all became friends. And that summer, the summer between my junior and senior year in high school, I got asked to go to parties and stay overnight. And I vowed, I'm like, you know what? Anybody that asked me to go somewhere, I'll go. And it was a good way to live. I now, if somebody wants to go do something, I'll go. If somebody asks me to go to a convention, assuming that they'll pay my way or something, I'll go. Why not? Because why miss out on experience? My grandmother used to say she'd get upset that I collected things, like my grandfather. She's like, why do you spend money in collecting things when you can have experiences instead? You can go to Europe and meet foreign girls, which she was absolutely right about that. That was a lesson that everybody should learn. Experiences, that's all we have. And at the end of our lives, you never want to regret anything. That's why you should do everything. You can't fail. Not really. And you learn from your mistakes. Just go forward and do what you want. Follow your dreams. That's what I say. Chuck Austin says, real Topeka people. Yes, Chuck. Almost Famous, Almost Famous might be one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I think it really is. And I like the longer version, the bootleg version or untitled version that's on the Blu-ray. It's great. Hi, Robert. Have you seen the Star Wars fan film for the YouTuber Star Wars Theory? I have not. I'll watch that. It's incredible. Oh, wait, is that the Vader fan film that dropped recently? Not sure. Lou asks, did you watch the Anderson Super Marination shows? My faves are Fireball XL5, Captain Scarlet, and the Mysterians. I have all of the Jerry Anderson. For those of you who don't know, there was a British producer named Jerry Anderson who began his career producing Super Marination children's shows that are surprisingly sophisticated. He started out with a supercar, Fireball XL5, Stingray, the Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, Joe 90, the Terrahawks. Then he made live action shows. One of my favorite things ever was the space. What am I saying? Something popped up, and I'm sorry. One of my favorite Jerry Anderson shows was his first live action show, UFO, and then he made Space 1999. I love Jerry Anderson. He made a really cool science fiction movie called Doppelganger, or as it was released here, Journey to the Far Side of the Sun. I really like that. He also made like an educational space show called Into Infinity, or AKA The Day After Tomorrow, that I got from Fanderson on DVD, about a family that goes into space, and it's all about the scientific accuracy of space travel, and they end up going, well, spoiler alert, they go through a black hole at the end of the movie. Wicked asks, am I a fan of Simon Pegg? Yes, I love Simon Pegg, although I loved him on Spaced. I've loved everything he's done pretty much. I was not a fan of his script for Star Trek Beyond. Calvin Dexter says, come to Tuscany anytime you want. My place is your place. I have a nice motorbike and there are wonderful roads to ride here. And the food and the wine is, I have no words. Dude, I'm going to take you up on that. I'm coming. Vesna says, are you interested in seeing Glass? I can't wait to see Glass. I can't believe that there's actually a sequel to Unbreakable and Split. When I saw Split for the first time, I didn't know it was an Unbreakable sequel. It was one of those movies that I didn't, M. Night Shyamalan, I didn't see The Visit, so his comeback was not, I couldn't believe it. I heard when I was watching Split, I'm like, they're in the diner, and oh my God, that's the music from Unbreakable. What? And then Bruce Willis showed up. I lost my freaking mind. Wake me up when you get there. I'll laugh out loud. If aliens came to Earth, I would show them District 9. Yeah, but what if they landed in like Monaco? What if aliens landed in Monaco? What if the prawns suddenly showed up in Monaco, or Alien Nation, those guys showed up in Monaco instead of, Fresno. Anthony Gonzalez says, I saw a photo of you posted a while back, yourself with George R.R. Martin. Yes, I was lucky. A couple years back at Comic-Con, I had been working with Melinda Snodgrass, who wrote the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Measure of a Man. She wrote many others. She was on the second and third seasons of the show. And one of her best friends is George R.R. Martin. So I was at a Comic-Con party. This is one of the great things about Comic-Con. And she took me into the VIP section, and I just sat down next to George R.R. Martin and started talking to him. Now, what's interesting about George R.R. Martin is I had been a huge fan of his way back in the 80s. I had read a novel that he had read. I'm speaking dyslexically. I had read a great novel that he had written called Fever Dreams, about, or maybe it's Fever Dreams, about vampires on the Mississippi River. I have a first edition of it, first hardcover edition. It's great. He had also edited what were known as mosaic novels that Melinda is now creating a TV series for, called Wild Cards. That is a fictitious an alternate history of the Earth. By definition, any alternate history is fictitious, but an alternate history of the Earth where superheroes were created by an alien bioweapon in New York City at the end of World War II. And it's all about what happens multi-generationally with all of those people. They're either jokers who had adverse reactions, or aces that were created to be, they became superhuman. It's really great. I can't wait to see the show. Oscar Castillo says, did you see the Star Wars fan short Odyssey? I don't know if I did. I'm not sure. Let's see. Have you ever watched Red Dwarf? Wake me up when you get there. House says, you know what? Every year we do the Starship Smackdown at the San Diego Comic-Con. We end Comic-Con with Starship Smackdown. We've been doing it for almost 2 decades now. And everyone asks about Red Dwarf. And I've seen a couple of episodes, but and they're from different seasons. So one day Red Dwarf is going to be one of those things where I'm going to get it's like what happened with me in Blake 7. I'd seen like one episode of Blake 7. It was always the same episode. I saw it 3 times. It was the episode where the Liberator gets destroyed. Servalon, that's all I ever saw of Blake 7. So when it finally came out on DVD, like at the beginning of the aughts, I bought all 4 seasons and binged it all, which I really liked. I'm going to do that one day with Red Dwarf. Let's see. George is too sweaty. Let's see. What's the worst movie you've ever seen? I'll tell you, the worst, look, I don't want movies to ever be bad. I don't know if it's the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's the only movie I've ever walked out of. It's not the only movie I've ever wanted to walk out of, but the only movie I ever actually walked out of was Shock Treatment, the unofficial sequel to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now, I don't believe that you can create a camp movie, movies that set out to be camp bug. I just hate that. Movies that are camp or cult films, the cult a cult movie becomes a cult movie organically. You can't force a cult film. Brian Eng says, you didn't get the opportunity to eulogize Schnepp online. Do you wish you had, or are you doing that now a little bit at a time? You know, I'd like to think yes. I'd like to think moving forward, carrying Schnepp's enthusiasm forward in my own life and doing these kinds of podcasts and being on John Campia's show is what I'm doing to keep Schnepp's legacy alive. He was a man that loved this stuff so much, and I think that's why we clicked. Is we take such delight in all of fandom and everything fandom has to offer. So, yes, I'd like to think what I'm doing is carrying Schnepp's legacy forward by doing this. Bright says, tempted to pick up Fever Dream. Pick it up. Get it. It's great. I walked out. Lithgow says, I walked out of Shutter Island. I can never walk out of a Scorsese film. Oscar Castillo says, what did you think of the Tech War book series? It was all right. You know, I read some of it, obviously, in because I had to. It's Shatner. Rick Van Boberson says, "Hey Rob, I DM'd you on Twitter for the Axonar script, but you never responded. I will. I'm slowly getting through all of those. I was deluged with that, and I've been doing that. You will get it." Ryan G. the Mang says, "I'd love to see you as a guest on Kevin Smith's podcast, Fat Man Beyond. I guess." I think you guys would bounce well off each other. I love Kevin Smith. I used to write for his website, Movie Poop Shoot, that Chris Ryle edited, who's now over at IDW. He was great whenever I could get my column in on time. If you, I used to write a column called Rob's Retinal Fetish. I wrote like 6 columns. I don't know if it's archived online somewhere, but look it up. It was all about home video. Wicked asks, binge watch or weekly episodes? I like to binge watch. Weekly episodes drive me crazy. Now, because the world has changed. Have you played video games? I love video games. In the modern era, the first video game that obsessed me was the Activision version of Battlezone that came out at the end of the 90s. It's both a first-person shooter and a real-time strategy game, and it's about the Cold War being fought on other planets in our solar system. I loved it. I love the physics of it. It was great. No one asks, Rob, have you seen Europa Report? Yes, I own the Blu-ray of Europa Report. It's great. As a matter of fact, Europa Report has a lot of 2010 in it. It's a low, but for those of you who don't know, Europa Report is a really well-made science fiction film that requires there's a lot of sets. It really stretches its low budget, and I found it highly entertaining. I love movies where anybody goes to explore a planet. Rob D says, hello, do you think knowing more about how movies are supposed to be made takes away from enjoying them? Not at all. Here's the thing. Even though I know how movies are made and worked on sets, all of that shuts off when you sit down and watch a movie itself, because I focus on the story, the characters. I never think about technique until I watch movies 2 or 3 times that I really, really like. No. All right, guys. So I am going to get off now because it's 1:03. I've talked for an hour. I think I'll come back tomorrow and come up with a topic, but I hope you guys like my story about Hollywood, and I'll try and come up with other things. And if you have other suggestions, please comment, please subscribe, hit the little bell on the page so it tells you when I do another one of these chats. It's been a lot of fun spending the holiday weekend doing these chats. It's been great, and I really appreciate all of you members of my Post Geek Singularity community. I appreciate you've been so nice and thoughtful, and you ask interesting, great questions. Please share the stream, tell your friends, join up, and I will talk with you guys probably tomorrow. And, who knows when next, because I like doing this.